Guys, what is going on? Welcome to this episode of Aussie English. This is going to be a kind of Q&A episode. I'm not sure what's going to happen in these episodes. I'm not sure where it's going to go. I'm not sure whether I should name them something different. You know, you guys should let me know what you reckon after you've heard the episode. Should I keep doing these? Should I not keep doing these? But yeah, so what am I doing? So each Monday on Instagram, I send out a little story and I ask you guys to ask me anything you would like. And I get some pretty standard questions, right? About, English, Australia. Some of them are more complicated than others, how do I get a 424 visa or, could be anything like that. And I'm like, I am not qualified to really talk about this. Do not have that knowledge, but I do my best to answer your questions. But I've been getting some really sort of personal questions recently, and I thought, it'd be interesting to kind of flesh these out a little more than just a 15-second or 10-second story. So I thought instead, it might be cool to kind of just do a monologue or, just me on the podcast talking. Excuse me. Answering some of these questions. So yeah, I would encourage you guys to email me at pete@aussieenglish.com.au. So that's the email address, right? pete@aussieenglish.com.au. And title the email, the question you want to ask, and then feel free to kind of have at it, right? To flesh the email out, to ask me what you want to ask me, give me more background, because again, on Instagram, you kind of get something like 20 words, if that, to be able to ask the question. So you guys probably want to ask me more complicated things, give me the context, give me the background. So that's sort of what I was thinking about. I got the idea because I sort of got addicted to this video game, right? So there's this video game called Far Cry 6. It's amazing. I don't know if any of you guys have seen Breaking Bad. I'm sure a ton of you have. But the bad character, is it Gus out of Breaking Bad? Let me see. Breaking Bad. I think it's Gus. Yeah, it's Gus, isn't it? Yeah. Gustavo Fring in Breaking Bad, whose actor is Giancarlo Esposito. He is incredible. An absolutely amazing character. An amazing character in Breaking Bad, but also a freaking amazing actor. Absolutely love this guy. And he is in this video game. So that was sort of part of the reason I bought it. He is the leader of a dictatorial nation. I think like a fascist nation that's, made up. It's not a real place. And he's running it with an iron fist. He's creating these drugs that are apparently used to cure cancer, but they're actually, really affecting the local population. There's, corruption, all that sort of stuff. And your job in this game is to effectively clear the country of his forces and then eventually take him down. So I kind of like these video games because there's a lot of story in them. So you get to really, you could take a sort of back seat to the actual video game playing and just watch the story. So each time you go on these sort of missions, it's kind of like GTA, which is Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto, where you're this guy who gets weapons and steals cars and goes on missions. It's kind of like a cross between that and Call of Duty sort of style, open world kind of Call of Duty, but it's a vast open world and you go on these cool missions, but there's sort of a lot of movie scenes each time you go on these missions, and they kind of all play together in this story of, these people you meet, friends, family, the oppression you've struggled through. So anyway, Far Cry, I absolutely love this game so far. It only came out the other day, and I was at the, where were we? We were at the mall nearby getting some shit from Kmart for the kids, some clothes. I think I lashed out on some sunglasses and hats. You guys might have seen me talking about that. So I finally bought some more sunglasses because my old ones got all scratched up. I've had them for ages and I decided to spend a lot more money on sunglasses this time in the hopes of actually taking care of them. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, so I was there doing that with my wife and kids. They'd gone off to get some clothes, I think, from Kmart or Target or something for the young kids. We don't really spend much money on their clothing because they tend to ruin it and grow out of it very quickly. So Kmart and Target does the trick. But I happened to see this game was finally released. It had been delayed, like 2 or 3 times in the last year and a half. And it was, it was finally out. I was like, oh, thank God. So bought it and I've been addicted to it ever since. Anyway, so this is a long convoluted story. Whilst I've been playing this game, I have started listening to some podcasts, and one of the podcasts that I've been listening to is Bill Burr's podcast. If you don't know who Bill Burr is, he's a comedian from, I think originally from Boston in the US. So he has this really cool Boston accent, and he is just really dark in terms of his humor, very blunt, and his comedy style is, it's partly funny because he's such an angry guy. So he's always on stage. He kind of rants about women, about children, about pets, about men, about, he rants about everything, like all really good comics. Nothing sacred. But he's just always angry. Everything really pisses him off. And so you see that rage on stage, but he's just hilarious. And so he has these podcasts where he answers people's questions. So this is where I'm trying to sort of get the idea from, right? Explain to you where I've gotten the idea from and what I kind of want to do. He gets a lot of people writing him in about relationship advice, about, I think he was talking about the caste system in India, about, he gets educated by some of these people who send in all this information and videos. And so I thought, it'd be really cool to create a podcast, series or episode like that, on a regular basis, where I could do the same for you guys. So if you have certain issues you would like talked about, you can ask me in emails, you can educate me in these things, you can send me information, I can learn more about them, I can talk about them, if it's relationship advice, Bill Burr talks about that all the time. So again, I've no problem at all. If you guys have any sort of relationship questions, raising children questions, I don't know, having amazing parents or unbearable parents kind of questions, anything like that, I was thinking this might be a cool series where I can just give you my 2 cents. Take it or leave it. This is my opinion. Feel free to ask me anything about this sort of stuff. So, yeah, I thought that was the sort of basic idea, and we can see where it goes. Hopefully it allows you to learn a little bit more about me too, so that you're not just listening to me constantly teaching you English and sort of presenting content to you, but instead you get to get a back seat or a front seat. I don't know. Would you be at the back of the bus or the front of the bus? But you'd be able to see or learn or hear, I guess, listen to what I actually think about certain things, So, yeah, that's the sort of, that was the reason I wanted to start this. That was the inspiration. So big thanks to Bill Burr and his podcast. It's really interesting. It's got a lot of depth to it, and it's really funny because he's just such a funny guy. So I'm sure I will not be able to bring that kind of humor to the podcast, though I will do my very best to still be entertaining and also informative. So again, the request here is for you guys to ask me anything. Send me an email, pete@aussieenglish.com.au. You can obviously go onto the website, aussieenglish.com.au, and send me any message there. You can send me a message on Facebook, on Instagram. Just get in contact with me. Ask me whatever you want, and I won't promise to read it out, because obviously it depends on what it is and how interesting it is, or if it's, really controversial, I probably will give it a pass. I'll veto it. But yeah, I will do my best. So anyway, for this episode, to start up, I thought I would go through some of the questions that I got on Instagram. So I try and read out a bunch of these. I answer probably about 50 or so each week, maybe, give or take. But let's go through some. Okay, so number 1 here. Have you ever come to Brazil? So obviously this guy is in Brazil. He's asking me this in Portuguese. So, muito obrigado, cara. Thank you very much for the question. No, I've never been to Brazil. You guys probably know, if you've been listening for a while now, that we wanted to go and that we had organized to go last year in August. I think that was when we'd set the dates originally, and we'd done this at the start of 2020. So it was probably literally in January that we had organized this, and just as we'd paid for the tickets and organized everything, COVID obviously came out, that was a crazy time. We were like, I remember just shitting ourselves, right? Being like, oh yeah, there's this pandemic that seems to be coming out of China. It's spreading around the world. And then I remember shit kind of got real when we saw America close its borders to China, and just being like, oh shit, because that was something that I don't think we've ever seen, since I've been alive, at least in the last 34 years. I've never seen a country like America close its borders to a country like China, another world power that's first world country, I believe, for the most part, because of a disease like that. So that was like, whoa, okay, the shit's hit the fan here. And then Australia did it. And it was so funny because initially everyone was like, oh, this is so racist. I can't believe people are doing this. And, it had nothing to do with race. Governments were freaking out about this virus. And looking back, it's so funny now. You're kind of like, well, they should have done it so much sooner. So anyway, yeah, we'd bought these tickets. We'd organized it all. The funny thing was that Kel had been sent about $5,000 from her sister. So effectively her sister's about the same age as Kel. She's a little bit younger, but they're very, very close in age. And she's been dying to see her nephew and niece, right? Our kids. And so she'd been saving all this money. She's single. She's been living in the house that Kel bought when she was in Brazil. So she was like, oh, I've got this money here. I'll lend you the money and you can just get a few plane tickets out, come and see us, and we can meet your kids. And so we organized all that, big thanks to Kel's sister for such a generous present. We bought the tickets. We organized everything. We were like, we're going to go for 3 or 4 weeks. It's going to be amazing. We'll see the sights. We'll go blah, 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 here. And then COVID struck and we postponed it initially because the flight companies weren't giving refunds. And then later on, they ended up just refunding everything. But the funny thing was that Kel's sister, we gave her the money back, right? So she'd sent the equivalent in reais, reals, if you want, from Brazil. She'd sent the equivalent of $5,000 to Australia, and we'd held it, obviously bought the tickets and everything for probably 4 months. And in that time, the real plummeted in value. So in comparison to the Australian dollar, it must have dropped by like 30%, 40%. So when we sent the $5,000 Australian back to her, she ended up making like $2,000, the equivalent of $2,000 Australian, so probably like what, 5,000 or 6,000 reais. So it ended up being a blessing in disguise. I think literally Kel's sister was laughing all the way to the bank. She was like, not only did I get my money back, but I made, some ridiculous amount of money, like an investment. So long story short, no, we haven't been to Brazil. Well, Kel's been to Brazil. She grew up there. But my children, nor I, neither of us, not one of us, has been to Brazil yet. We would love to go. It's just a matter of waiting for the borders to open up, right? And then we'll probably organize doing it in the next, maybe next year we'll do it if we have the money. It's such a tough one. I can't imagine too what position Kel's in. You guys will probably be in similar positions. I'm sure lots of you are in this position of living in a foreign country, Australia or elsewhere, where you don't necessarily have family nearby. And you don't necessarily, especially during COVID, have the chance to return home and go see your family. And so Kel's in that exact situation where even if she wanted to, she can't go back to Brazil, or at least she could, but she couldn't get back to Australia currently. So I think she could leave, but she wouldn't be able to get back. So that's not going to happen. But she hasn't seen her folks for 6 years, right? She hasn't seen them in the flesh. She hasn't been there and actually spoken to any of her parents or either of her parents. Her sisters, her brother, her uncles and aunties, she hasn't seen them for 6 years. So I just can't imagine what that does. She's a very strong woman. Really, really impressed when I think of that thing. I don't know if I could ever survive for that long without seeing my folks. It's an insane amount of time. But lucky for her, she has things like social media today, right? That she can use to at least talk to them on a regular basis. All right, going to the next question here. I was talking with a guy from Perth by Facebook, and he said he likes me, but suddenly he stopped talking to me. And I really liked him, so now I don't know what to do. Should I say something or give him space? I think this is one of those situations where if he's no longer talking to you, there's not much you can really do in terms of getting his attention back. The best thing you can probably do is to just ignore him, or, to find a way to send him messages that are very casual. Just, how's it going? What's up? And see if he'll respond in a sort of, enthusiastic manner. He's not just going to sort of wipe you off or, ignore the response. So you could probably test the water that way. The good thing with things like Facebook and Instagram and everything, if you send people messages, obviously you can see if they've seen them. And so if I were you, I would probably test the water if I was really interested in this person. If you, really, really like them, maybe give it a bit of time, see if he's going to respond to you. And then I would probably send him a casual message just being like, hey, haven't heard from you. How you been? Or, what's going on? How's your week going? Blah, blah, blah. And see if he's seen it. It's kind of a bit, it's kind of a bit stalkerish. See if he sees it and if he replies relatively quickly after the fact. If he sees it and doesn't reply, he's not interested. Or that he's probably seeing someone else. He's got other women that he's interested in, right? So that would be what I would do. By the looks of it, you look like an attractive young woman. Your best years are ahead of you. You are going to have plenty of opportunities to meet other men, to come in contact with great men. There are plenty of great guys out there. So if you're a good girl, a good girl in that you're a good person, you're an awesome catch, I would suggest just moving on. You deserve someone who's going to want to talk to you and follow things up and take things more seriously. If someone can't be bothered replying on Facebook, I mean, how hard is that? So, yeah, it is one of those things. I remember doing this when I was younger too, always just being sort of too overcommitted. And it sucked being on the dating scene and having to think about this shit all the time of like, am I messaging too much? Am I not messaging enough? Should I ask them about this? And for me, it was always just such a mind fuck when you seem to hit it off with someone and you would go out, you'd have a great time, you'd chat to them and they would ghost you. Right. So to ghost in this sense would be that they just suddenly disappear and no longer reply to you or talk to you. And this is the sort of downside of social media and our insane connectivity with everyone today, is that we just have access to so many people all the time that it's like being a kid in a candy store and you don't know what lolly to buy, to mix slang terms, candy and lolly. So I think this happens in the dating scene today. I'm so glad that I found my wife, because when I found Kel and we were dating, we did a long distance thing too, sort of similar to what it sounds like your situation is, although we were both in Australia. She was in Townsville, which is far north Queensland, and I was in Melbourne at the time. So we were probably separated by 2,500 kilometers. And the thing that just made life easy was that there was just no bullshit games. And I know that a lot of you guys who are young, you sort of enjoy the thrill of the chase. Everyone likes being pursued by someone, right? And you kind of have to work out the limits of that. What's okay, what's not okay, what's fair, what isn't fair. But once you get to like your late 20s and you're still doing that kind of shit, it's just so painful. I remember being on Tinder and I probably went out with 100 people over maybe 3-4 years, right? So it would have been like one a week, maybe one a week, one every 2 weeks. I was just getting to know new people, right? I wasn't hooking up with these people so much. It was more about just dating and trying to find the right person, because I'd gotten to my late 20s and I was just like, I can't dick around anymore. I want a family. I want children. I want to find a life partner, you know, a best friend. I'm just over the whole dating scene game thing, right? Of just switching between people as if they were jumpers or something. And yeah, I just remember how painful it was, just getting ghosted all the time. You know, people just don't know how to bow out politely and just say, look, I like you. You seem really nice, but I just don't feel a connection here. So I'm sorry, but I don't want to, you know, catch up again. But thank you. There are plenty of ways of doing that politely and sort of nicely in a good, respectful way, as opposed to just blocking the person or not replying to them anymore, which happened all the time. And I'm sure I'm guilty of doing that in the past as well. You know, you got to be one to know what not to do in the future. But yeah, it was just such a breath of fresh air when I met my wife finally, and we could just talk honestly. And there was no sort of facade there of either one of us trying to attract the other one or play hard to get, of, you know, hot and cold, being really keen one minute and then the next minute being like, oh, I can't reply. And I remember I almost fucked things up because I played this game with her. When we finally met, she came down from Queensland and she was in Melbourne staying at a friend's house. And this would have been maybe a month after we had met online. So we met through YouTube. She commented on one of my videos and I saw she was Brazilian and I just started learning Portuguese. So we ended up, you know, finding each other on Instagram, having a chat there about it and just, and just clicking, getting along really well. And then she told me as we were sort of chatting, oh, you know, despite being in Townsville, I'm coming down to Victoria to see a friend. I've already booked this stuff prior to meeting you. Coming down for a week in, I don't know what it would have been, like October, end of October or something like that. And so she came down and she came straight over effectively to my house. And, you know, we got all of that out of our system and then spent the entire day together and had an amazing time. It was, you know, incredible. And then I was in my head too much. So the next day she went back to her friend's place and stayed the night there. And the next day I didn't reply to her. I didn't send her a message. I was waiting for her to message me. And you guys probably know, you know, the women are probably like, oh, dude, dick move. If you've you've just met someone that you've sort of fallen in love with online. You've spent your first sort of night together or day together in that way. I'm sure you guys can read between the lines. And you didn't message her again the next day. And I think the reason for me at the time, I was in my head too much and I was freaking out thinking, my God, I don't want to seem too keen because it'll freak her out, right? Like if I just, first thing in the morning, I message her and I'm like, you know, I can't get you out of my head. It was an amazing day, like far out. Can I see you again? I thought, oh my God, she's going to be like, Jesus, this guy's full on. But it turned out, so I was waiting and she sent me a message in the evening when she was out with a friend, the friend she was staying with. And I hadn't realized that she'd asked me to come out with her. I think somehow that had got lost in translation or lost in communication along the line there. But she'd actually wanted me to come out with her and her friend to get some drinks. Whereas when she was sending these messages to me, I thought she was having this night with her friend alone because, you know, she'd come down from Townsville to stay with her friend. So I thought, I'll respect that. And so I was replying to her, I was chatting to her, and I was like, oh, I hope you guys have an amazing night, blah, blah, blah. And the funny thing was, I think somehow the next day we ended up texting and she was just like, okay, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck happened yesterday? What the hell, dude? Like, you know, we sleep together on the, whatever it was, the Monday, say, and Tuesday I go out with all my friend and we chill out for the night. And then you don't say anything. You don't try and come out. You don't ask me back over. You don't, you know, blah, blah, blah. You just sort of leave it to small talk. And I was the whole time saying, you know, I was terrified of just being overwhelming. I really wanted to text you. I wanted to hang out with you. I was thinking, how is she out and not asking me to come out with her friend, right? And chill out and meet her friend. And she was like, I had you, idiot. So anyway, long story short, I almost fucked things up with my current partner. You know, my kids wouldn't have been born. I wouldn't be married to this amazing person if I had played that game too hard, right? If I'd really been in my head. So ultimately, the thing that worked really well for me and that led to me finding my soulmate, my partner, you know, the love of my life, my wife, was just being a straight shooter, being honest and opening myself up. Obviously, you have to kind of do this slowly as you're getting to know one another. But yeah, the thing that I loved about her was the fact that she just avoided any of those sorts of bullshit hot cold games. She respected me as a person. She was very upfront. She was not necessarily sure that things were going to become a full-on serious relationship, at least in that first week when we were getting to know one another. I remember that. But she was at least a straight shooter, and she appreciated that. And so, yeah, I guess that's my sort of story to tell you a bit more about what my past has been like on the dating scene, having to deal with that. And anytime, the good thing about being on somewhere like Tinder and dating a lot of different people is that you get experience with not just dating lots of different people and, you know, working out what you like, but you also get experience with interacting with people in a romantic setting like that, right? Where the pressure is off in terms of working out whether you're both on the same page. I remember prior to Tinder, you would ask people to get coffee and people wouldn't know if it was a date or if you were just catching up, just hanging out, everything like that, especially if you're at university, right? There's a cafe everywhere and you just, after class, say, do you want to get coffee? The person doesn't necessarily think, oh shit, this is a date, you know, he's interested romantically. They may just think, oh, let's go get a coffee and then walk home because we're both here. So yeah, the good thing about Tinder is you get used to those things. So I would say for young people especially, you know, if you're in your late teens or in your early 20s, you don't necessarily have to go out there and fuck everyone, right? You don't have to sleep with everyone. You don't have to do any of that stuff, but get to know people and get to work out what you really want in a partner and also how the dance is kind of played in terms of dating. What's someone like who does respect you and your time? What's someone like who doesn't and does this kind of crap of just ghosting you, disappearing, all of a sudden, then popping up again and saying hello. And the good thing about things like Tinder, it doesn't have to be Tinder, but the good thing about dating today with the internet, with all these apps, with all these websites, is that you have access to so many different people. It's a gift and a curse. But the good thing is that it's not like it's going to be hard for you to meet someone else in the future. So don't get too sucked in or bogged down for one person, especially when you're just getting to know them, especially if it's long distance. If they treat you like shit from the beginning, this is people, especially at the start when you're dating, this is people on their best behavior. You know, this is them showing you the best possible version of themselves, trying to advertise as best as possible that this is what I'm like all the time. And obviously that's never the case. The facade drops and later on, you know, you get to really know the person. But if they're going to treat you like crap on the first date or when you're first getting to know them, you know, what are they going to treat you like after a year or 2 years or 5 years or when you get married? So people ghost you like this, I would just ditch them, find another one, you know, just find someone better, find someone who respects you more and wants to get to know you and treat you as you deserve to be treated. All right. What's the next one here? Can an Australian resident work in New Zealand and vice versa? So I believe that Australia has a deal here. I should look it up. Deal between Australia and New Zealand work. New Zealanders and Australians are free to visit, live, and work in each other's countries under the Trans-Tasman Travel Arrangement. So, yeah, it looks like Australians and New Zealanders can travel to one another's countries. You don't need visas. You can work in one another's countries. We have this agreement, obviously, so it benefits both of our economies. I think there probably is a bit of a directional thing where there's probably more New Zealanders coming to Australia than there are Australians going to New Zealand in terms of like permanently living there. Though, to be fair, I've never lived in New Zealand, so I don't know. Could be the other way around. But it is very common for you to encounter New Zealanders and they won't have a visa. They don't need one for Australia. They can work here, they can travel here, they can live here for effectively the rest of their lives. I don't know if they can get benefits. That's the only difference. So can a New Zealander get Medicare in Australia? Let's see. So Medicare is the Australian government scheme to take care of medical bills. What if you're a New Zealand citizen in Australia? Oh, okay. Maybe you can. If you're a New Zealand citizen, to enroll in Medicare, you need to prove you live in Australia. Far out. Okay, so you can get Medicare in Australia. If you're a New Zealander, you just have to enroll and prove that you're living in Australia. So you can also enroll if you have lived in Australia for 6 months or more in the last 12 months, or live here and applied for permanent residency. Oh, wow. Okay. So there you go. Interesting. New Zealanders. They come over here. My dad loves New Zealand. I need to really go there at some point and spend a significant amount of time getting to know the place, because he seems to think it's better than Australia. There's more freedoms, beautiful mountains. There's lots of snow. There's lots of wildlife, pristine environments. Apparently the people are freaking amazing. So yeah, I'd absolutely love to go to New Zealand in the near future. It'll probably be the only place we can go to for a while overseas. I think that and Fiji. Fiji may have opened up recently to Australians who are vaccinated. Let me just have a bit of a beer here. All right, next question. Okay, tell us some tips about relationships, especially with foreigners. Yeah, so this was an interesting one. I had my wife kind of chat about this on the stories. I grew up surrounded by Australians, and there were definitely foreigners that I came across. You know, I went to a high school that was pretty toffee, right? It was pretty expensive, lots of rich people there, and we had a lot of foreign exchange students from places like China and Japan and, you know, Southeast Asia, from rich families. And so it wasn't like we'd never caught up with any foreigners. We never knew any foreigners. One of my best friends in high school was a French exchange student named Amory. Amory was great. He was a pisser, a really funny guy, and I still talk to him to today. But yeah, growing up, I don't know at what point. I think it was probably when I went to uni. That was when I really got surrounded by foreigners. You know, Melbourne Uni is full of Asian students. It's got loads of people from Japan, China. It seems like it's one of these universities that attracts a lot of foreign students. You know, it's a very good university in Melbourne. A lot of people want degrees there, and so it had a lot of foreign students, particularly from Asia. So I got to know loads of Asian foreigners living in Melbourne as well. I got to know so many different people from, you know, places like India, Colombia, Spain, Europe, all over the place. You know, you go to Melbourne and there are people from everywhere living there. It's just amazing. And I don't know at what point, but I think it was probably when I started learning French seriously. This would have been like 2012. It would have been after 2012. You guys probably know the story of how Aussie English started, if you've heard those episodes. But I started training at an MMA gym, right? Mixed martial arts. And I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, primarily after I sort of started at that place and tried all the different martial arts. I was like, damn, Jiu-Jitsu looks gay. I was like, it looks so weird. And then I tried it and was like, this is the best thing ever, right? It's just incredible. It's just absolutely incredible. So much fun, so cerebral. It was like, far out. What a blast. So I got addicted to that. And every second person that I was training with was from China, Singapore, Japan, Korea, France, Colombia, Brazil, all over the place. And so I started getting this complex of not speaking a foreign language, and picked up French again. And within 6 months got to sort of basic fluency, and was just interacting a lot of the time with the French people at the gym in French. And something happened during this period where it wasn't like I fetishized foreigners. It wasn't like I thought, you know, damn, you know, there's this sort of stereotype in Western societies of guys being obsessed with Asian women, or being obsessed with Indian women, or being obsessed with black women. I'm sure there's a female version of this, but it's definitely prevalent amongst some of the guys that I knew at the gym there, at least. It wasn't like that at all. There wasn't this kind of, I'm really into a race or this sort of fetishized thing of foreigners, but I got really, really interested in different cultures and learning more about someone, their language, where they're from, and the fact that they had such a diversity in terms of background, right? They hadn't just grown up in the same town as me, going to the same school as me, with the same cultural experience as me, and, you know, we just knew each other back to front. And so during this period, I sort of decided, whether consciously or subconsciously, that I was kind of keen to not marry an Australian, right? That it would be kind of a dream of mine to marry a foreigner who spoke a different language. I never really thought about what language that needed to be. or what country they needed to have come from. It didn't really bother me if they were Asian, Indian, Sri Lankan, whatever, South American. I never cared about any of that. It was more, I was just really interested to meet someone that ticked all the boxes in terms of, romance, that I was interested in them, got along with them, had a blast with them. They made me laugh. Romantically, we were compatible, everything like that. But also had just a different life prior to meeting me, had grown up somewhere else, had different stories, knew completely different people, spoke a different language, had such a completely different background that was just interesting for me, that I found, like with my wife now, Kel, I've sort of lived this dream, right? And it's just so much fun and humor comes up in our relationship because she has had a completely different upbringing from me. I mean, today she was telling me some fucked up stuff. It always makes me so sad because Kel came from a very poor background in Brazil. She was not rich by any means. And so she just always has these horrifying stories that I can't relate to at all, having grown up in Australia. And the good thing is she's used them and they've made her stronger. But like today, she was like, when I was at university, she was showing me some graduation photos that her dad had just found and sent her and was like, look, here's you in 2012. And Kel was like, fuck, that was me. I was in a different life. That was like a different person, because at the time she was like, I remember I was going to 2 different university campuses. So I had to catch the bus between them. And I didn't have enough money to get food and get the bus ticket. So I would eat breakfast in the morning and I would go to university. I'd then get the bus with the little amount of money that I had to the other university, and I would study until, 8 or 9 p.m. at night or something. And I won't have eaten for the entire day. I wouldn't have eaten because I had no money to buy food at either of those places or anywhere during the day. And I remember just being like, dude, that's fucked. Like, that's just, I can't imagine being in a position like that. And, I'm certain that a lot of you guys listening can relate to that, will know what that's like, will know people that have experienced that, whether you have or not. But I remember that just absolutely blown my mind. And so Kel always has these gems that just come up. And anytime I what would you say? I show my sort of Western white privilege. She always checks me with these things of like, yeah, well, it's easy for some, right? If you get more than 1 meal a day. So long story short, you're asking me about relationship advice with foreigners. Find someone who doesn't necessarily fetishize, right? You don't want some freak who's like, oh, I just love Asian women, or I just really have a thing for black women. Those sort of people, it's not what I mean. But find someone who's interested in you culturally, linguistically, who has a fascination with other people's cultures, who wants to know more about you, your country, your tribe, your group of people that you've come from, the town you've come from, what your life was like, who's interested in your language, who's just curious about you, but also your experience as a human being. I think that's the key to finding someone who you're just going to hit it off with, right? You're going to have a great time with, you're going to have a great life with, because it's just never ending. There's always stories that I have to tell Kel, and pretty much every time she'll just be like, yeah, fucking rich white guy. Here's my, disparaging story from Brazil that's going to put you in your place. I can't remember if I say anything, if I complain about anything in my childhood, she always just puts me in my place and is just like, you are such a spoilt rat. And then immediately goes to spoil Noah and our daughter, Joanna, way worse than I was ever spoiled as a child. That's the thing that blows my mind. I'm always like, well, you had this full hard life where, there was never margarine in the house to put on your bread. You saw that as a luxury, or you hadn't eaten ice cream until you were 15 years old or something. If your mum brought home cheese, you were mind blown. And yet you'll buy like a $10 packet of blueberries from the shops because you want to make sure that Noah has blueberries. I'm like, I never had that as a kid. My parents were never going to spend that amount of money on blueberries to give them to me. We had a raspberry bush in the backyard that had fruit on it for like 2 weeks of the year. So you'd go out there and dive into the thorns of this raspberry bush and come out with a fistful of juicy berries, but that was about as good as it got. Anyway, so yeah, relationship advice with foreigners. Obviously, you want to find someone who's kind of culturally aligned with you. You know, obviously that's going to be different for everyone. But if you're, say, I don't know, incredibly Catholic and from Brazil, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to get along with, say, a very, very Muslim man from Saudi Arabia. You know, it's not to say it can't happen, but I would probably also be aware of those kinds of cultural differences and work out what's going to work and what isn't going to work, and just don't kid yourself in that area. And then beyond that, just try and find someone who suits you like you would if you were in your home country, but then who's interested in your culture, your language, and wants to share that with your children. That's a massive thing. The number of people I've met in Australia, whether they're Brazilian women married to Australian guys or Australian women married to Brazilian guys, the amount of people I've met who've had children with one partner being from one country, one from the other, and then the partner who, say, is Australian, just doesn't give a shit about learning Portuguese, doesn't give a shit about Brazil, has no interest at all in getting to know your family if you're the wife here. It just ends up being a headache. You see that they're just fighting all the time. It's stressful too, because a lot of the time I've seen their kids just ditch the language. They don't want to learn Portuguese because it's embarrassing, because the dad doesn't learn it or has no interest in it. So I think that's a key. If you're coming to Australia, especially if you're a woman and you're thinking about settling down with an Aussie guy in particular, try and find an Australian guy who is interested. There's plenty of them out there. There are plenty that are interested in learning languages, that have traveled. You know, get someone who's left the country and has seen a little bit of the world and is just a decent dude who wants to share your culture with your kids, if that's something that you're thinking about. Because that was always in the back of my mind. I was like, once I met Kel, I knew within the first week, I knew you're the one. And I remember telling her that and her being like, you're fucking crazy. And I was like, you wait and see. And like, look who's here, Kel. Who won that bet? But I was thinking, you know, if we have children, it's going to be one of the most important things in the world for them to speak Portuguese, to speak their mother's first language, to speak her language, Portuguese, to understand her culture, to be surrounded by cartoons, books, things that reflect her culture, so that when they go there, they can understand, interact, get to know Brazilian people more easily than if they had never been exposed to it. And they will be able to have relationships with their grandparents and their uncles and aunties and everything like that. So I think that was a big thing that led to the success of Kel and my relationship. It was just that I was so interested in Brazil, in Portuguese, and I was so committed to passing that on to our kids, almost more so than she is. So yeah, that's my sort of advice. And a question for you guys would be, tell me what it's been like. Have you had any really good relationships with foreigners, whether you're, you know, if you've come to Australia and you've gotten to know an Australian guy or girl, or have you had any nightmares, right? So I'm sure that's the other side of it. I'm sure there are just as many Fruit Loops and nut jobs in Australia as anywhere else in the world. So feel free to email me and tell me how your stories have been. Have you got any advice that you'd like me to share with the audience? All right. What else have we got here? Is it easy to get Mexican food in Australia? Yes. It's going to be easier in certain places than others. And I guess the caveat here, the disclaimer would be, how authentic is it before it's, for it to be considered Mexican food, right? So, you know, you go to Safeway or Woolworths. I always call it Safeway. It was Safeway when I was a kid. Woolworths bought it, and it's Woolworths now. But you go to Woolworths or Coles and you go to the foreign food aisle, and you'll see there's always Mexican food. You're going to have stuff to make enchiladas, fajitas, you're going to have nachos, and you'll have the American burritos and everything like that in there. You'll be able to get tinned beans. I think from memory, I was dating a Mexican when I was at uni, so this would have been 15 years ago. And I remember her telling me how hard it was to find a certain type of cheese. There was a certain type of cheese that Mexicans love, but it's not common here in Australia. And it goes like in a lot of their different foods. All I did was ring up a Mexican restaurant business that supplied Mexican restaurant food, right? So the chips, the beans, the cheese that was authentic, they imported it from Mexico. And I just went to the factory and bought some of it from them. And I remember it blew her mind, blew her fucking mind when I pulled this cheese out and was just like, here, is this what you were looking for? And she was like, how the hell did you find that? So I think the thing that I'm trying to say is if you're living in any of the big cities, if you're in places like Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney, any of the big cities, there's almost certainly going to be Mexican restaurants. There'll be loads of them. There'll be Mexican food at the supermarkets. Again, how authentic it is, you tell me. I'm not a Mexican. I have to get my friend Paulina to weigh in here. She's Mexican living in Melbourne. But there's loads of Mexican people here. There's loads of South Americans. And so South American and Central American food is to be found all over the place, right? So, yeah. I'd probably just get in touch with some of the restaurants here. Try and get a job at one and then just have Mexican food all the time. Okay. We got a lot of questions here about the borders, right? Are the borders reopening now? So we had something weird happen last week where the new the new, God, I've had a total brain fart. New South Wales Premier. What's his name? Dominic Perrottet. So this guy took up the position of power. I guess the Liberal Party voted him in after Gladys Berejiklian resigned or stepped down the other day. He did something really weird. He opened the borders. You guys may have seen me mention this on my Instagram stories. I was like, holy crap, guys, New South Wales is opening their borders on the 1st of November to anyone who's vaccinated and has a visa. Instantly that day, the Prime Minister was like, yeah, nah, that's not happening. Cancelled. So it's a difficult one. I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later, in that I think it'll probably be the start of next year based on what I've seen. I think there's a huge emphasis on reaching 80% or more, the vaccination rate or mark. At the moment, I think, what have we got? Vaccination rates, Australia by state. I think we're doing pretty well at the moment. I don't know what the overall percentage is. What have we got here? Doses given out, 32.7 million. Fully vaccinated Australians, 14.4 million. That is 56% of the entire population. So the numbers are kind of confusing because quite often the politicians are talking about percentage of people vaccinated who are eligible to be vaccinated. So these are people older than 12 years old. And so it's not... Once 80% of those people are vaccinated, that's like 60% of the entire population. So it can be a little bit confusing. But yeah, we're doing pretty well. I think we're vaccinating at one of the fastest rates in the world at the moment. So we're on track to be at 80% of the eligible population to be vaccinated in probably the next 2 months. And then I think that's when they're going to start considering fully opening the borders. I think the reason, from what I understand, of why Scott Morrison raged up and told Dominic, what's his name, Perrottet, yeah, no, that's not happening with New South Wales, is because we still have a lot of Australians overseas that haven't been able to get back into the country. And so he's just like, what the hell are you doing in terms of just allowing any foreigner with a visa and the vaccination to get into Australia when we've got a shitload of Australians in places like Europe and, India and South America trying to get back home, and they can't currently. The only other issue is that the plane tickets, from what I've seen, are expensive as fuck. They are insane. It was like $3,000 to get to London or something, probably twice as much as normal. So, yeah, just nuts. But keep an eye out. Anything could change after that press conference from Dom Perrottet, just him randomly saying, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to open the borders. That came out of nowhere. So the Prime Minister could get up tomorrow and just say, have at it. Go whole hog. The borders are open. Just keep an eye on it. All right. What have we got here? Hey, Pete, what's up? How is living in Melbourne? Is it funny? The Aussies, are they friendly there? Melbourne's really good. I mean, and it's funny. It's almost like the foreign people that I know that live in Melbourne think Melbourne's better than I believe the Melburnians who grew up there do. So a lot of the time, the people who move to Melbourne think it's freaking amazing, right? They love the fucking place. They think it's just, wow, Melbourne. And the people who grew up there are kind of like, yeah, it's okay. And you see that it wins all these like most livable cities. I guess I don't really know because I haven't lived in too many other cities, at least not overseas. You know, I've lived in Canberra, Geelong. I haven't lived in any other Australian city for a significant amount of time. So it's not really fair for me to say if it's better or not. It's obviously a great place if all these people are saying it's the most livable city in the world and foreigners that move here love it. I think it's good if you're getting educated, it's obviously great. Lots and lots of universities, lots of choices. So if you're thinking of coming here and doing that, it's great. It's a good place to live in terms of travel as well. There are a lot of places nearby where you can go camping down the coast, you know, Great Ocean Road. You can go to Wilson's Prom, Gippsland, the Grampians. There are lots of places in Victoria, so Melbourne's kind of a good central place. I think it's really safe. The people are really friendly. Yeah, they're really friendly. I don't know about funny. We do pretty well with the comedy festival that takes place every year, I think in March, April. So I think that's the biggest Australian comedy festival. If you're in Melbourne, try and go to that. It might be it's probably been closed in the last few years, but it might be up again in this year coming 2022. But yeah, Melbourne, it's a beautiful place. I loved it just because of the amount of different people that I came across, right? So it wasn't just white European central, to be honest. There's probably more foreigners there than there are Australian, like born and raised European heritage people. That was one of the complaints I actually used to hear from a lot of people who came to Australia from overseas. You know, they moved to Melbourne and they're like, this place feels like an airport, like Singapore airport, where you've got people from every country in the world just wandering around and, you know, going from one place to the next. And it was one of those things, you get on the tram, especially in the CBD, and you're probably more likely to hear a foreign language than you are English from the people talking to one another on the tram. So again, depends what you want. If you're coming to Australia and you're like, you know, I just want to live in the country with loads of kangaroos and, you know, fair income, true blue, European, Aussie cowboys and all that sort of stuff, then you're not going to see any of that in Melbourne, so, to be honest. So you've come to the wrong place. But if you're coming to a Western country because you want to get educated or you want to live with your young family or you're a professional and you want to live in a safe environment and, you know, you love being surrounded by foreigners, people who are taking the same journey trip as you are in life, then Melbourne's definitely a good place. And it is one of those things where it's a gift and a curse. If you're coming here and you want to learn English, especially, Melbourne may not be the best place to go initially because you will easily find people from your home country. You will easily be able to rent houses with them, catch up with them, get to know them, surround yourself with them, and you won't learn English anywhere near as well as you would if you'd been somewhere more regional, right? Further away from the big metropolitan city of Melbourne. So again, yeah, if you want that kind of authentic Aussie experience and you want to avoid foreigners, well, people from your home country who speak your native language, Melbourne may not be necessarily the best place to go because you'll have to make an active effort to kind of avoid them. So I had a lot of friends who had this issue who were, the one that comes to mind was Colombian. And I remember she'd come to Australia. She didn't speak that much English, so she instantly moved in with Colombians. I think she was living with like 4 of them. And she quickly became friends with all of them. One of them got her a job working in a restaurant that, you know, all of them were Colombian there. So she was speaking Spanish like 95% of the time and then going to English class. And I remember her saying, you know, I just don't understand why my English isn't getting better. And I was like, look, you can come to a foreign country, but still not be in an immersive environment, right? And you can stay in your native country and immerse yourself in a foreign language. The same way, you know, like I could surround myself with Portuguese at home, only read Portuguese books, my phone's in Portuguese, using Portuguese on Netflix, everything like that without leaving the house. But I could also move to Brazil and surround myself with Australians and never speak Portuguese. So if your goal is to improve your English first and foremost, it sucks. It's hard, it's difficult to avoid making friends with people from your home country and not using your native language, you know, making that effort to use it as little as possible, but it pays dividends. It pays off so much in the long run if you can do that in the short term, where you just deal with the pain of working on your English initially being alone, at least in terms of your foreign language, and having to use English to communicate with everyone, but you will rapidly improve and you will rapidly be friends with heaps of people from all over the place because you'll be using English. So, yeah, it all depends on what your goals are, but Melbourne's a good place to check out. Why is it easier for children to learn a language than adults? That is a good question. And I guess it depends what you're asking here. Do you mean a child in terms of them learning a native language from birth or acquiring that language, as it were? There's a difference between acquisition and learning. Or do you mean a child going to school and learning a language? Because I think children who go to school and then learn a foreign language, I learned Indonesian, Japanese, Chinese, or Mandarin Chinese, and French at high school and in primary school, but it was arguably just as hard back then in high school and primary school learning these languages as it is today. But why is it... Siri just came up on my phone. Why is it easier? It's because they have nothing else in their brain, right? They have no language yet, and their whole purpose is effectively to get you as a parent or as someone around them to give them what they want, to give them what they need in terms of surviving. And so there is a huge amount of momentum and inertia for them to learn a language in order for them to get what they want, right? For them to be able to communicate that they want food, that they want to go outside, that they've pooed their nappy, that they've done X, Y, Z. There's a massive amount of force that's kind of pushing a child to acquire a language to communicate with its parents and the ones around it, right? We're very social creatures. So I think that's why it's not that it's easy for them. I watch my son, and he's still, he's 2.5. So he spent 2.5 years, and he's still, every sentence he utters is probably grammatically incorrect if it's more than 2 words. He mixes languages. He mispronounces things all the time. But yet he communicates, right? So he gets what he wants at the end of the day, even if he makes these mistakes, because we know what he wants. We know what he's trying to say. And if we don't, he tries something different until he gets the message across. But for an adult learning a language for 2.5 years, you are going to be light years ahead of where that child is, right? So I never really think of it that it's like it's easy for children. It's a pain in the ass. I see my son struggling so often in terms of trying to communicate, trying to get the message across. We think it's easy for them because they kind of just do it in the background, but you forget how long it takes. How long does it? What's the youngest person that you could have an adult conversation with? Right? They're probably 12, maybe 13, 14. And even then, you won't be able to talk to them about really sophisticated topics like politics because they haven't had time to sort of form their opinions or get educated in that area too. So it's just different. It's different. But yeah, imagine that. Imagine someone saying to you, you can learn French, but it's going to take you 15 years before you can have an adult conversation with another French person. You would just be like, fuck that. I'm not learning French for 15 years so that I can, finally have a conversation with them. Whereas for an adult, you could go to France, you could do all the things that I just talked about in terms of immersing yourself, and within probably 6 months, you could have a sophisticated adult conversation, because we forget too how much other stuff is actually layered on top of or behind the language you learn, right? Understanding how the world works, being educated in general, right? Understanding things like just how language works, getting an idea of what grammar is, understanding, I don't know. There are so many things you don't realize children don't know, right? Like I remember when my son first worked out what a bird was. Because he'd always seen them far away, but he'd never seen them up close. And it blew my mind. I remember watching him, and there was a bird, I think it must have been a seagull or a magpie or something, came right up to him, and you could see he was just freaked out of just like, what the fuck is this thing in front of, that's a bird? I normally see these birds in the sky with their wings open, 100 meters away, flying around. How is this thing walking around with no wings in front of me that's like black and white with a sharp face, the same as the thing that was in the sky? So there are all these things you forget that children are trying to learn. They're trying to work out. They have absolutely no idea. What happened the other day? My wife went out with our children and they went to the playground, and there were some kids there that were like 5 and 10, and they were playing with Noah really well. And at one point they're like, "Oh, Noah, did you want to go meet my mum across the road?" And Noah's just like, "Yeah." And they just grab his hand and walk off with him. And my wife saw him and grabbed him, but was just like, "Oh my God." You forget how much that he just has no idea. He has no idea about what's out there. He has no idea about what people are capable of. He has no idea about danger. The worst thing that's probably ever happened to my kid up until today is the fact that I accidentally jammed his hand in the car door. Like, that's, if you were to ask him, if you were to sit him down and say, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? He would say, sometimes mum doesn't give me ice cream. Sometimes she makes me eat food that I like, but I forget that I like. And then when I finally have a mouthful after 10 minutes of crying, I'm like, oh shit, I actually like that food, And then he would say, Dad slammed my hand in the door because I was screaming, walked behind him when he closed the car door, and I put my hand out. And that would be the worst thing that's ever happened to him. He has absolutely no understanding of, how malevolent people can be. He doesn't know what death is. He doesn't know, he doesn't know what being injured is like. He barely understands what being sick is like. So it's just mind blowing. So I guess my point is it's a funny thing. We see language learning is so difficult for adults and think it's so easy for children, but you don't appreciate how hard it is for them, how long it takes, and how much more they have to learn than just a language. So even if Noah could speak perfect English today, he's not going to be able to have a conversation because he doesn't have deep thoughts. So there's so much else going on. You have to learn about the world. You have to learn about all these different areas in your life, how a computer works, how to drive a car, how relationships work with human beings, how to wipe your ass when you go to the toilet, how to buy shopping, all of that sort of stuff he has zero idea about. But when you as an adult learn a foreign language, that's all dealt with. You already have complex thoughts. You already understand the world. You already have so much experience under your belt when it comes to living, when it comes to being a human being, that none of that has to be dealt with effectively when you're learning a foreign language. You may have to learn about, obviously, the history, the culture, everything like that in the country that you're going to beyond just the language itself, so that you can have meaningful conversations and interactions with, say, other Australians. But in comparison to, say, a child in Australia growing up and learning English in Australia, it takes so much longer for them. And it happens, we would think, easily because there's no other choice. They got no other option, right? They can't fall back on another language. They have no understanding of the world anywhere else, and so they have no choice but to learn the language here over that period of time. So anyway, yeah. I would say there's probably a lot more to this. This is kind of my experience and my 2 cents, and I haven't obviously looked this up ahead of time. I'm sure that there are some cerebral things here going on too, right? Some neurological things where you forget too that I think babies are born with more, I'm trying to remember the right wording. I should know this. Neurons, right? They have more cells in their brain than an adult human, because what happens pretty quickly after birth, you have all of these cells in your brain, and rapidly the ones that aren't being used die off. And the ones that are obviously start forming connections and developing things like movement, speech, everything like that, coordination, everything like that. And you also have a lot more space. There's a lot more potential connections in your brain that can be made because you don't have all this other baggage that has been built up over a lifetime. And so when you're learning things like a language, it's probably much easier for you to store and keep knowledge, right? Learn words, learn patterns, learn vocab, because you don't have to find space for it in your brain. You just have space, right? It's like saying, you've got 2 storage compartments, 2 bedrooms. One of them's full of shit and the other one's empty. And you're like, well, I want to put a whole bunch of files or say a whole bunch of clothes in one of these rooms. Which is it going to be easier to put it in? Obviously the empty room, right? Because there's nothing taking up any other space competing for where you want to put the clothes. So I think that's a big part of it too. There's probably a lot of you guys are really intelligent, educated people in this sort of area too. I have a lot of linguists and biology nerds and lovers that follow the podcast. So I'm sure you guys can probably explain this better to me. Again, send me an email if you are an expert in this field and you know more about childhood linguistics and how it's easier, maybe how it's more difficult than it is for an adult to learn a language. But yeah, it's one of those things. I don't think it's helpful to really look at learning a language as easy or hard in general, let alone comparing yourself to a child or even comparing yourself to another person. Go out and watch a bunch of videos from polyglots like Steve Kaufman, Ollie Richards, and you'll see that we put them on a pedestal and think, oh, these freaks just speak 10 languages fluently, perfectly. You know, I could never do that. They're absolute geniuses. But when you peel away the sort of cover on the surface, right, when you scratch the surface and they open up a bit in their videos, you'll find out that they forget languages, they lose vocab, they can't think of the word, they connect two languages together because they're similar and they can kind of work it out. And they're not perfect by any means. And it's, you know, Luca Lamprioli is one of these guys where I remember seeing his schedule. So he speaks something like, I don't know, 14 languages. Let's see, Luca Lampriolo, sorry, he's Italian. So he speaks 11 languages here according to his YouTube channel. So Luca Lampriolo is an Italian polyglot who has learned 11 languages so far, including German, Russian, Polish, Mandarin, Chinese. He's well known in the language learning community and currently resides in Rome, Italy. So I was watching a video, I think it was an interview with him, and he was talking about his daily routine. You know, so what does it take to learn and maintain something like 11 languages? And he was saying that in the morning, he gets up and he spends 3 hours studying his 3 weakest languages. So he'll do an hour in each one. So I think he was learning Greek, you know, and there were 2 other languages there that he was having not trouble with, but that were sort of more basic languages that he was in the process of learning. So he spends 3 hours in the morning. 3 fucking hours studying 3 languages. He then gives private lessons to all of his students, and he makes sure that they are native speakers of certain languages that he either speaks or is learning, so that he can communicate in those languages during the lessons, so that he can work on those languages too and maintain those. So he does that as his sort of full-time job. He tutors people on language learning. I think he probably also teaches things like English, French, and Italian. I think there's probably a few others. He speaks English, French, Italian, and Spanish, like I think close to native level in all of those, and then the rest it kind of sort of drops off in skill. But, you know, he can have a conversation in like all these languages. It's just nuts. Then the other thing was that he makes sure he lives with multiple people who speak other languages that he doesn't have as much access to via his lessons. So he had a whole bunch of people say, I think that were Polish and Russian or German or something living in his apartment with him. So he can speak to them during the day. And then I think he was saying he has a nighttime routine where he studies more languages. So the whole thing here is that you see someone like Luca and you see him interviewed. You see him do one of these videos of, you know, what is it here? Polyglot speaking in 11 languages, crushing myths. And you think, fuck me, this guy is a freak. Absolute freak. You know, he just speaks these languages. What a nut job. How I could never do that. The guy's obviously, you know, on the spectrum and just one of those like savants that he's just total freak. He's not even human. But then you actually get to know him and you see his videos, you know, as much as you can get to know him from watching his videos, and you see, holy shit, the amount of work and discipline this guy puts in to be able to maintain this number of languages is the inhuman part. It's not the fact that he can speak these languages that is inhuman. It's the fact that he can maintain this kind of regime in order to do this. And obviously he's built this lifestyle because it's the kind of lifestyle he's always wanted, and he really enjoys it and absolutely loves it. You know, I think he's a legend. But it's easy to see a YouTube video like that and think, yeah, he's a freak. I could never do that. So I guess my main point here is you never know what's going on beneath the surface and how much effort is required. You know, everything else that is just happening behind the scenes that you don't actually get to see. So yeah, I don't think a language is easy or hard. I think all languages take a lot of work, and you just have to find a way to fit it into your life on a regular basis where you're enjoying it, you're having fun, and you have a use for it. Far out. So we've gone for like an hour and 10 minutes here, guys. I'm not really sure how long to make these. You know, I've only answered like 4 questions, but yeah, let's keep going. Okay. This is one that I've been not wanting to talk about for a long time, but I get asked about this quite a lot now. And I kind of got told off for for pussyfooting around, right? Sort of being really delicate. So hopefully I don't lose a lot of listeners over this. Maybe I should stop being so negative. But the question comes from a gentleman named Oscar, and he has said, have you got a religion? I mean, do you believe in God? So, no, I don't. I am an atheist. And I know that a lot of you are probably going to cringe. Again, there's me like clarifying it, like trying to be like, don't hate me, you know, please don't hate me for being an atheist. I used to be the most strident atheist, where it was the full fuck you mentality to religion, and I don't care what anyone else thinks. There's no God. You're morons for believing in God. You know, I used to be that kind of a person, but the older you get, the less it's almost like my teeth have been blunted and worn down, and I just no longer care, right? Like, if you're a good person, you're a good person. I've met so many people who are religious, so many Muslims, Christians, you know, Jewish people, Hindus, you name the religion, especially living somewhere like Melbourne. And once you get surrounded by people who have all these beliefs under the sun, right? But are just normal human beings that are friendly, respectful, empathetic, and fun to hang around with, you kind of just stop with the real strident atheism stuff. There's definitely a lot to talk about here. I don't really know how much I want to go on about it, because the question was kind of more like, are you religious? And the answer is pretty simple. No, I don't believe in God. I guess the explanation here would be the reason I don't have a specific religion, you know, and again, this is not me proselytizing to you guys. Ultimately, if you want to be religious, that's a personal choice, right? I don't care. It's as long as you're not affecting anyone else negatively, harming anyone else, then have at it, right? If it brings joy to your life, go for it. But for me, I think the reason I never had a religion, there's sort of 2 issues here. And again, part of it I'm not really sure how much to talk about on the podcast, because I probably have family members who might listen to this, and they are a big reason for why I am an atheist, at least I believe. Yeah, I probably won't go down that road. But needless to say, there are certain people in my family who have not really treated my immediate family very well, to say the least, and they were very religious. The other thing is I was raised by scientists. So my parents always raised me to question what I believed, right? And look for evidence to support what I believed. And if there was no evidence there, then to have no issue abandoning that belief and instead focusing on truth in terms of how it can be measured, right? I mean, truth in terms of things that can actually be shown to be true, or at least shown to be not false. It's kind of a hard topic to kind of discuss off the top of my head. I kind of need time to think about this. But that was the main reason, at least for me personally, not having a God. I was like, there's no evidence for me to believe that thing. And so it seems like such a huge gamble when you consider that there are, I don't know, 3,000 different religions in the world. You just pick one and you say that I believe this is the right religion, right? It comes down to faith. I believe this is the correct one, and I believe this is how I need to behave, and this is what God wants. For me, it was always one of those things of, even if there is a God, surely he's not going to punish me for being skeptical of just believing what other human beings are telling me I need to believe without evidence. So that was why I was always like, look, I am an atheist because I just don't actively follow a certain religion. And it's one of these things, a lot of you are probably thinking, what the fuck is an atheist? I thought these guys are like Nazis, right? You guys like eat babies. For me, atheism's an interesting thing because it's the absence of something, right? Like bald is a haircut, but it's the absence of a haircut. So I guess it's not really a haircut, right? Because you have no hair that you've sort of shaped or turned into a cut. So atheism to religion is like being bald, like shaved to the skin bald like I am, is to haircuts. So it's the lack of religion, the same way that being bald is the lack of a haircut. It's not that I have chosen a certain haircut. You just are one because of the lack of any other haircut. So I'm an atheist because I don't actively follow any specific religion. All right? If that makes sense. I don't actively go out of my way to really think about this very much. I don't catch up with other atheists, and talk about atheist stuff. It's just, it's what I happen to be as a result of the absence of religion in my life, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about this sort of topic if you guys want to chat about it. Again, I'm not really here to convince you to do or be or believe one thing or another. The ultimate goal of these podcasts is just to get you to learn English, to think about these topics, to develop your own opinions about these topics. So again, don't feel like just because you disagree with me on XYZ that you can't keep listening to this thing. I'm a human being. I'm not perfect. So yeah. Where are we going to go now? Maybe we'll do one more and we can finish up. Should we do an English question? We had one question here. How has being a parent affected hold on, let me try and read this properly. How has being a parent of 2 children affected your relationship? This was an interesting one. I think I talked about this one with my wife as well on the stories. So it's been hard, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. It's pretty brutal having children. I'm sure that you guys with children know what it's like. I think a big part of it is the fact that when you have children, the roles that each of you play as a parent are never equal. And so there's always room for both of you to feel like you're getting the shit end of the stick. To feel like you're getting a raw deal, right? That you're getting the bad end of it. You have it harder than the other person. And I think Kel and I have realized that quite often because we end up having fights or arguments about XYZ. I did this, you didn't do this. All you have to do is hang out with the kids and it's easy as. All you do is just work and it's easy as. And you have to get very comfortable with the fact that you're both doing different things, but each person is important. And the role of each person is really important, and what you do is really important, even if it isn't the same thing. And you have to be comfortable with that. So that's been a big part of it, getting used to that. Becoming understanding. It was really funny. Kel and I never fought prior to having children. So everything was hunky-dory. Everything was easy. We always got along, had an amazing time, and pretty much just hung out all the time as great mates, as well as, obviously lovers. Prior to having children. But as soon as you have this other human being in your relationship, in your house, it is like the shit hits the fan and there's just so much more to argue about. You said you were going to do this, you forgot that, you need to do this. So, oh my God, I'm so stressed out because I've had the kids all day and they've been screaming. It's just insane, guys. We were in the car the other day and I just started laughing. My wife was near crying. I just started laughing uncontrollably because the 2 kids were just losing their shit, like absolutely going nuts. I think Joanna was just past being tired. We were driving home. She wouldn't sleep. We thought sometimes she sleeps in the car for hours. Sometimes she doesn't. So we're in the car and she doesn't sleep and she just starts crying uncontrollably. And Joanna is just brutally loud. I've never heard a baby cry as loud as Joanna cries. And it's insane because she was so small. She was born way underweight. She was like 2.5 kilos, if that. So she was like a kilo lighter than normal. She was tiny. But within like 2 months, she had a set of lungs on her that could smash glass. And Kel had hearing loss for a few months because she was breastfeeding and trying to deal with these issues, you know, just trying to get her to sleep, trying to get her to breastfeed. And obviously, anytime the baby was upset, Joanna just lost her shit and would cry. And it was just so loud. So she's in the car and she's just losing it. And instantly Noah snaps as well. He's had enough. He's like, why am I in this fucking car trapped with this psycho sister? And so he's in the back. She's losing it, screaming. And then he starts not crying or screaming, but doing that. Like, it's so annoying. You guys with kids will probably know what that's like, right? It's sort of halfway between sort of complaining and crying, where they're not crying, but they're doing this weird, annoying kind of, and you're like, oh, just say what you want, right? And it's when they can't express their frustration. They don't know what they're saying. They don't know how to express it, and so they just make noise. My toddler, my 2-year-old does this. So Joanna's just screaming her lungs out, like literally screaming. And we're in this enclosed space, and Noah starts making these noises, these whines, and it just goes for like 10 minutes. And Kel at that point was so tired because she dealt with this all day. So, you know, I don't think she cried, but she was definitely angry. You could see she was pissed. And I just started laughing. That's sort of my response in these situations, because I'm like, I know if I don't, I'm going to rage, you know, and I'm not going to turn around and be like, shut the fuck up. But it gets to the point where you're just like, I don't know what else to do. I need to let my emotion out. And so I laugh. And the funny thing is, just by laughing, Kel gets angry because she thinks I'm laughing at her and the fact that she's upset. But I'm just laughing at how difficult the situation is, and it's just my way of releasing it. And so we end up having a full fight because of that, where she's just pissed because I'm laughing, and I have that response at times when the kids just lose it. I just start laughing, and I'm just like, I think the situation's just funny, and I'm sort of like, I don't know what to do. I'm at a loss. I'm just like, this is fucked. So having to deal with that has been interesting. So I guess that's the sort of point. I think, what was the question? How has being a parent of 2 children affected your relationship? It's made it stronger. I think in the long run, you just had to get used to these little bickerings, these little fights every now and then where we get frustrated, we get angry, we want to be alone, you know, we get pissed off. You just have to deal with it, rage up, and then make up, right? So then just be like, look, I was a dick. I'm sorry for laughing. I shouldn't have laughed. I'm sorry if you thought I was laughing at you. You know, that wasn't what was happening. And I think the biggest thing is just communication. I've got a friend at the moment who is in a similar situation to me. He's got 2 kids, and he and his wife are on the rocks, right? So they're not going well at all. He's constantly talking about divorce. I think he suffers from depression, and he doesn't communicate with his wife, doesn't talk to her. He gets on and chats to me, and, you know, love him. He's a good friend, but I constantly tell him, you know, talk to your fucking wife. Stop bitching about it to me. It's not going to change shit. It'll make you feel good in the meantime, being like, oh, my wife's a bitch, blah, blah, blah. You know, this happened, that happened. But I'm always like, you know, what's her side of the story? But I'm like, look, all this shit's happened and it's pissed you off to the point where you're telling me, but you're not talking to her. And so it's not going to get resolved. She's going to be pissed at you because this, you know, whatever's happened has happened. Whether you're right and she's wrong, or she's right and you're wrong, she's going to be pissed. You're still pissed. You haven't talked to one another to resolve it and move on. That's the biggest thing. I'm always like, just talk to your fucking wife. Jesus. Like, it's the easiest thing in the world to do, but it's the hardest fucking thing in the world to do. The good thing is, like a habit, it gets easier the more you do it. So I was always saying to him, the way to fix your relationship is going to be to talk more, you know, and I think that's why a lot of couples go to therapy, because they don't have the ability, for whatever reason, to be able to talk to one another themselves. They can't. Neither of them can strike up a conversation and be vulnerable and talk about these sorts of issues and then get past them. And I think that's just one of the things Kel and I had to practice a lot. So we don't really avoid getting angry at one another. We'll have those moments, but we we pretty much make up the same day every single time. And that was something that I got from Jordan Peterson when I was sort of deep learning about him and following him. He was saying that with his wife, I think his wife's name's Tammy, I think he was saying that he made a rule that if and when they fought, they never went to bed angry. And so I think that I've sort of taken to heart and made sure no matter what, any fight I've had with my wife, even if I'm like 100% certain, you know, I'm right, she's wrong, I'll make sure that we resolve it and move on, both apologize just for the fact that the fight occurred, and go to bed, go to sleep, hugging. So I think that is a big part of it. Being mature enough to realize that being right isn't as important as maintaining the relationship you have with your wife so that your children have parents who are in a healthy relationship, that you don't matter anymore the same way that your children matter. So I think putting that into kind of perspective always helps make small fights over, you know, bullshit just seem so much more irrelevant. And it's like, why are we fucking arguing about this shit? You know, like what matters is that Noah and Joanna are happy, healthy, and safe, really, and they have what they need. So, you know, this shit's trivial, and yeah, I guess that's it. It just it really puts things in perspective. So, guys, I think that's probably enough. I have answered, I think, 5-6 questions here. I think I got like 100, so I'm really sorry I didn't go through a shitload of these. If you want to follow me on Instagram, just search Aussie English. You'll find me on there, and I normally try and reply to as many of these as I can. Sometimes I get through all of them. Sometimes I don't, like the last week. But please send me a message and let me know what you think of these episodes. The other thing is I'm thinking about whether or not I transcribe them, because if I transcribe them, so this is an hour and a half, that's going to take probably about 3 hours of work for my transcriber, the guy that works for me. And then it'll probably be delayed by a few weeks to come out. So I'm not sure whether I just don't transcribe it and you guys just treat this as a listening comprehension kind of episode and I can publish it straight away, or if I transcribe it and it's delayed. So yeah, let me know what you reckon about that. I'm also not sure whether or not I make these members only episodes, because I could potentially see myself doing this on a regular basis. I could do this every single week. I could do this multiple times a week. Yeah, I guess just email me. Let me know what you reckon about these episodes. And if you have a sort of question that you want to ask me, feel free to just have at it. Tell me about your life. Tell me about your issues. And I'll give you my opinion. I'll try and give you some advice on whatever it is. You know, you got girlfriend problems, boyfriend problems, language problems. Do you want advice about moving to Australia? What's life like here? Whatever you want, feel free to send me an email. Remember, that's Pete, P-E-T-E, at aussieenglish.com.au. And again, you can send me a message on Instagram, on Facebook, and I'll try and take those and, turn those into episodes as well. Anyway, this has been fun. I hope you enjoyed it. And until we chat again, see you next time. Next time, bring a beer, guys. I'll make sure I bring a beer and open it up and we can just chill out. We can hang out for a good hour and a half and just talk shit, you know, shoot the breeze. And I can show you more of my personality, what I'm like, what my opinions on things are. And you can email me and tell me I'm a moron. So, hope you enjoyed it and I'll see you next time. Peace.